The sound of breaking glass pierced the tense silence as Victoria Lynn's trembling hand hovered over the document that would strip away everything her father had built. Desperation clawed at her chest as the ink from the pen threatened to seal her fate forever. But before the black liquid could touch the yellowed paper, the doors to Judge Harmon's office burst open with such force that the hinges nearly gave way. "Stop this right now," a deep voice commanded, echoing through the room with authority that made every head turn. Silver Reef, Utah, 1882, had never witnessed such a dramatic interruption, and Beatrice Fairchild had never been so relieved to see a man covered in trail dust standing in a doorway. Beatrice stared at the tall figure silhouetted against the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the doorway. His broad shoulders were tense, and though a shadow fell across his face, she could see the determination in his stance. "Mr. Vance Lambert," Judge Harmon huffed, rising from his seat. "This is a private legal proceeding. You have no business, I have every business being here when you're forcing a woman to sign away what's rightfully hers," Vance replied, stepping fully into the room. His spurs jingled with each deliberate step across the polished wooden floor. Dust from the trail still clung to his denim pants, and his black Stetson was pulled low over his eyes. Beatrice's uncle, Harold Fairchild, rose to his feet, his face reddening beneath his meticulously trimmed beard. "This is family business, Cowboy. I suggest you turn around and leave before I have the sheriff remove you." Vance didn't flinch. Instead, he reached inside his leather vest and pulled out a folded document. "I believe this might change your mind about who has rights to be here." Judge Harmon adjusted his spectacles and took the paper, his bushy eyebrows rising as he read. "This appears to be a letter from Thomas Fairchild naming Mr. Lambert as executor of his estate in the event of his death." Beatrice's eyes widened. "What?" She looked from the document to Vance, seeing him clearly for the first time. Beneath the trail dust and weathered skin was a face she vaguely recognized, a man her father had mentioned in his letters. Harold snatched the paper from the judge. "This is preposterous. My brother would never entrust his legacy to some drifter." "I'm hardly a drifter, Mr. Fairchild," Vance said evenly. "Your brother and I were partners in the Silver Crescent mine for the past 3 years. He trusted me enough to make me executor, and I intend to honor that trust by making sure his daughter isn't cheated out of her inheritance." Beatrice stood, smoothing the folds of her dark blue dress. At 24, she'd spent the last 5 years in Boston, attending university against her family's wishes. She'd returned to Silver Reef only 3 weeks ago for her father's funeral, unaware that her uncle had been plotting to take control of her father's estate. "Mr. Lambert," she said, finding her voice at last, "I appreciate your intervention, but I'm curious why you waited until this very moment to make your presence known." A hint of a smile touched Vance's lips. "I just rode in from Carson City, Miss Fairchild. Your father's lawyer there, Mr. Holloway, sent word that your uncle was moving rather quickly to settle the estate. I came as fast as I could." Judge Harmon cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of events. "Perhaps we should postpone this meeting until all parties have had a chance to review the documentation properly." Harold slammed his fist on the desk. "This is absurd. My niece knows nothing about running mining operations. The sensible thing is for her to sign over control to someone who understands the business." "That would be convenient for you, wouldn't it, Uncle?" Beatrice said coldly. "Especially since the Silver Crescent just hit a new vein last month, according to Father's last letter." Vance's eyebrows rose slightly, impressed by her knowledge. Harold's face flushed an even deeper red. "You've been away for years, playing at being educated while your father built something meaningful. What could you possibly know about mining? Geology was among my studies, she replied with quiet confidence. Along with business management. Father made sure I was prepared to take over someday, even if you weren't informed of his intentions. Judge Harmon stood, gathering the papers. I believe we've heard enough to warrant a thorough review of Thomas Fairchild's wishes. We'll reconvene in 3 days. He looked at Vance. Mr. Lambert, I'll need to verify the authenticity of this document. Of course, Your Honor, Vance said with a nod. Mr. Holloway is on his way with all the necessary paperwork. He should arrive by tomorrow's evening stage. Harold grabbed his hat from the rack. This isn't over, he hissed, glaring first at Beatrice, then at Vance. Not by a long shot. With that, he stormed out, nearly knocking over a clerk in his haste to exit. When the door slammed behind Harold, Beatrice felt her knees weaken. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, the full weight of what had almost happened crashing down on her. Thank you, Mr. Lambert, she said quietly. I believe you may have just saved my future. Vance's stern expression softened slightly. Your father was a good man, Miss Fairchild. He talked about you constantly, how proud he was of your determination to get educated. I couldn't let his wishes be ignored. Judge Harmon excused himself, muttering about needing to review precedents, leaving Beatrice and Vance alone in the office. How did you know I'd be here today? She asked, gathering her reticule and gloves. I didn't, he admitted. I went to the mine first, looking for you. The foreman, Jenkins, told me your uncle had taken you to town to settle some paperwork. The look on his face told me something wasn't right. Beatrice nodded. Mr. Jenkins has been loyal to Father for years. Uncle Harold tried to dismiss him just yesterday. That doesn't surprise me. Vance offered his arm. May I escort you home, Miss Fairchild? I suspect your uncle might not be in the most agreeable mood, and I'd like to make sure you arrive safely. She hesitated only briefly before placing her gloved hand on his arm. I would appreciate that, Mr. Lambert. And please, call me Beatrice. Vance, he replied with a nod. As they stepped out onto the boardwalk, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Silver Reef's main street. The mining town had grown considerably in the 5 years since Beatrice had left for Boston. New storefronts lined the streets, and the sounds of the stamp mill echoed in the distance. Silver Reef has changed, she remarked as they walked. It has. Your father was a big part of that growth. The Silver Crescent employs nearly 100 men now. Beatrice felt a swell of pride mingled with grief. I wish I'd come home before he passed. His letters never indicated he was ill. He didn't want to worry you, Vance said gently. He was planning to surprise you at your graduation next spring. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, determined not to break down in the middle of town. How long did you know him? Nearly 4 years. I came to Utah looking for a fresh start after the war. I'd been drifting for years, working ranches and mines across the territory. Your father gave me a chance when most wouldn't look twice at a man with no references and a military record. You fought in the war, she asked, studying his face more closely. He couldn't be much older than 30, which would have made him very young during the conflict. Last 2 years, he nodded. Enlisted at 17. Spent most of my time with the cavalry in Tennessee. They turned onto a side street leading toward the residential area, where the more successful mine owners and merchants had built their homes. Thomas Fairchild's house stood on a small rise, a handsome 2-story structure with a wide veranda and carefully tended gardens. As they approached, Beatrice noticed a buggy parked outside her uncle's. Her steps slowed involuntarily. We can go somewhere else if you prefer, Vance offered. Noticing her hesitation, she squared her shoulders. No, this is my home. I won't be chased away from it. Vance nodded approvingly. Your father said you had spirit. I'm beginning to see what he meant. As they climbed the steps to the veranda, the front door swung open. Harold Fairchild stood in the doorway, a small valise in hand. Behind him, Beatrice's Aunt Margaret appeared, her expression worried. "You've made a grave mistake today," Harold said, his voice low and threatening. "Both of you. The only mistake would have been allowing you to steal what Father left for me," Beatrice replied, standing her ground. Harold stepped forward, towering over Beatrice. "You think you can run a mining operation? You'll be bankrupt within months, and when you come crawling back for help, remember this moment." Vance moved slightly, positioning himself between Beatrice and her uncle. "I believe your niece asked you to leave her property." For a tense moment, Harold looked ready to strike, but his wife placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Harold, please," Margaret pleaded. "Let's go home." With a final glare, Harold brushed past them and stomped down the steps. Margaret lingered, her eyes meeting Beatrice's. "I'm sorry, dear," she said softly. "He truly believes he's doing what's best." "By forcing me to sign away my inheritance?" Beatrice asked incredulously. Margaret lowered her eyes. "There's more to it than you know. Be careful." With that cryptic warning, she hurried after her husband. Beatrice watched them leave, a chill settling over her despite the warm evening air. "What did she mean by that?" "I don't know," Vance said grimly, "but I intend to find out." Inside the house, Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper her father had hired from among the Chinese workers who had come to build the railroad, greeted them with evident relief. "Miss Beatrice, thank goodness you return. Mr. Fairchild, he take papers from your father's study." "What papers, Mrs. Chen?" Beatrice asked, alarm rising in her voice. "Maps, I think. Mining maps." Vance and Beatrice exchanged concerned glances before hurrying to Thomas Fairchild's study. The room showed signs of having been searched, drawers left partially open, books askew on shelves. "He was looking for something specific," Vance said, surveying the disarray. Beatrice went to the large oak desk and opened the center drawer. Father kept his most important documents in a hidden compartment. Her fingers worked beneath the drawer, pressing a concealed latch. A small panel at the back slid open, revealing an empty space. "It's gone," she whispered. "His journal. He kept detailed notes about the mine. Every new vein, every assay result." Vance frowned. "Harold must believe there's something valuable recorded in those notes, something worth stealing." "But what?" Beatrice wondered, sinking into her father's chair. "The Silver Crescent is already one of the most productive mines in the region. Perhaps it's not about what's been found, but what hasn't been found yet," Vance suggested, leaning against the desk. "Your father mentioned a theory he was working on about the possibility of a much larger deposit beneath the existing mine." Beatrice's eyes widened. "The mother lode. He wrote to me about it, but I thought it was just speculation. From what he told me, it was more than that. He'd been taking samples, mapping fracture lines. He believed he was close to proving his theory. And if he did—" Beatrice trailed off, comprehension dawning. "If he did," Vance continued, "the Silver Crescent could become the richest mine in the territory, maybe even the richest in the West." Beatrice stood abruptly. "We need to get those documents back." "Agreed. But first, we need to secure what we already have. Your uncle won't give up easily." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the desert air already warming as Beatrice prepared to visit the mine. She'd slept fitfully, her dreams plagued by visions of her father and unanswered questions. Mrs. Chen had prepared a hearty breakfast, and to Beatrice's surprise, Vance arrived just as she was finishing her coffee. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, removing his hat as he entered the dining room. "I thought you might appreciate company on your visit to the mine." Beatrice smiled, genuinely pleased to see him. "Not at all. I was just about to leave." They rode out together, Beatrice on her father's favorite mare and Vance on his own sturdy gelding. The Silver Crescent was located about 3 miles outside town, nestled in the red rock formations that gave Silver Reef its name. As they approached, Beatrice could see the busy operation men moving in and out of the mine entrance, the stamp mill crushing ore, wagons loaded with silver bearing rock. It was a far cry from the modest operation her father had started when she was a child. Jenkins, the foreman, hurried to meet them as they dismounted. He was a solid man in his 50s, with a weathered face that broke into a genuine smile at the sight of Beatrice. "Miss Fairchild, it's good to see you taking an interest. Your father would be proud." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I intend to learn everything I can about the operation." Jenkins nodded approvingly before turning to Vance. "Mr. Lambert, glad you made it back in time." Beatrice noticed the easy rapport between the two men. "You've worked together before." "Mr. Lambert was your father's right-hand man for the past few years," Jenkins explained. "He's been overseeing our expansion into the western section." This information surprised Beatrice. "I thought you were just my father's business partner." Vance looked slightly uncomfortable. "Partner, employee. The lines blurred over time. Your father gave me a small stake in the mine in exchange for my expertise in expanding the operation." Before Beatrice could respond, a commotion from the mine entrance caught their attention. A group of miners emerged, led by a man Beatrice recognized as Peter Sullivan, one of her uncle's associates. "What's Sullivan doing here?" Vance asked Jenkins in a low voice. "Showed up first thing this morning with papers claiming Mr. Fairchild appointed him as the new mine manager," Jenkins replied. "I told him I wasn't making any changes without hearing from you or Miss Fairchild directly." Sullivan spotted them and strode over, his expression triumphant. "Ah, Miss Fairchild, I was hoping to speak with you. Your uncle has appointed me to oversee operations here while the estate is being settled." "My uncle has no authority to make such appointments, Mr. Sullivan," Beatrice replied coolly. Sullivan produced a document from his coat. "Perhaps this will clarify matters. A temporary injunction from Judge Harmon, giving your uncle administrative control until ownership is definitively established." Vance took the paper, reading it carefully. "This is dated yesterday morning before our meeting with the judge." "Which means it's no longer valid," Beatrice added. "The judge agreed to review all documentation before making any decisions." Sullivan's smile faltered slightly. "That's not how I understand it. Mr. Fairchild was quite clear." "I'm sure he was," Vance interrupted. "But unless you have updated paperwork from Judge Harmon that takes into account the executor letter I presented yesterday, I suggest you leave the premises." Sullivan's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Lambert. Harold Fairchild isn't a man to cross." "Neither am I," Vance replied evenly. "And neither is Miss Fairchild." With a final glare, Sullivan turned on his heel and stalked back to his horse, followed by the men he'd brought with him. "That won't be the end of it," Jenkins warned as they watched Sullivan ride away. "I know," Vance agreed. "But it buys us time until Holloway arrives with the full documentation." Beatrice felt a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "You seem to know more about my father's affairs than I do, Mr. Lambert." Vance met her gaze directly. "Your father kept me informed because he trusted me to protect his interests and yours. I know that might be difficult for you to accept, given that we've just met, but I hope you'll give me a chance to prove my loyalty." Something in his steady gaze made Beatrice believe him. Perhaps it was the way her father had spoken of him in his letters, or perhaps it was her own instinct, but she found herself nodding. "Show me the mine, Mr. Lambert. I want to see everything my father built." The next few hours were a revelation for Beatrice. Vance guided her through the mine operations with patience and detail, explaining the extraction process, the quality of the ore, and the recent expansions. She was impressed by his knowledge and by the respect the miners showed him. "Father mentioned a new vein in his last letter," she said as they stood at the entrance to one of the deeper tunnels. Vance nodded, lighting a lantern. "That's where we're headed now. It's quite remarkable, one of the richest veins we've found yet." He led her carefully through the tunnel, pointing out the supporting beams and ventilation shafts her father had insisted on installing for safety. Finally, they reached a section where the walls glittered in the lantern light. "This is it," Vance said, holding the light higher. "The last chance vein, your father called it. He discovered it just 3 weeks before he passed." Beatrice reached out, touching the wall where silvery streaks ran through the red rock. "It's beautiful and valuable." The assay showed it's nearly 80% pure, far richer than anything else we've found. "Is this what Uncle Harold is after? This vein?" Vance hesitated. "It's valuable, certainly, but I think he's more interested in what your father believed it pointed to." "The mother lode," Beatrice murmured. "Exactly. Your father theorized that this vein was just a branch of something much larger, a primary deposit that could dwarf everything we've found so far." They made their way back to the surface, emerging into the bright afternoon sunlight. As they blinked, adjusting to the light, Beatrice noticed a familiar buggy approaching. "Uncle Harold," she said grimly. Vance straightened beside her. "Let me handle this." "No," she said firmly. "This is my mine and I need to establish that now, but I'd appreciate your support." He looked at her with newfound respect. "You have it." Harold Fairchild climbed down from his buggy, his face set in a mask of forced pleasantness. "Beatrice, my dear, I see you're taking an interest in your father's operation. How commendable. What do you want, Uncle Harold?" She asked directly. "Simply to check on my investment. I did finance a significant portion of the western expansion after all." This was news to Beatrice, and she glanced at Vance for confirmation. "Your father repaid that loan last year," Vance said, "with interest." Harold's smile tightened. "Nevertheless, as your closest male relative, I have a responsibility to ensure you're not being taken advantage of." He cast a pointed look at Vance. "Especially by those who might have their own agendas." "The only person with an agenda seems to be you, Uncle," Beatrice replied. "First trying to force me to sign over my inheritance, then stealing Father's journal and maps, and now sending Sullivan to try to take control of the mine." Harold's facade of pleasantness slipped. "You always were too clever for your own good, Beatrice, just like your father. He never knew when to listen to wiser counsel either." "Is that why you argued with him the day before he died?" Vance asked quietly. Harold's head snapped toward him. "What are you implying?" "Nothing yet," Vance said, his voice deceptively calm. "Just noting that Thomas seemed troubled after your visit. He mentioned you'd made demands he couldn't agree to." Harold's face flushed. "I merely suggested a partnership that would benefit us both. He was too stubborn to see the opportunity." "Or perhaps he saw it all too clearly," Beatrice suggested. "Now, unless you have legitimate business here, I must ask you to leave. We have work to do." For a moment, Harold looked as though he might argue further, but something in their united front made him reconsider. "This isn't over," he said, climbing back into his buggy. "You'll soon realize you're out of your depth, Beatrice. When you do, my offer stands sign over controlling interest, and you can return to your books and lectures in Boston while still enjoying a comfortable income." They watched him drive away, dust billowing behind the buggy wheels. "He knows something," Vance said thoughtfully. "Something about the mine that makes him this determined." "Whatever it is, we need to find out," Beatrice agreed, "and we need to do it before the hearing in 2 days." That evening, Vance joined Beatrice for dinner at her home. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, preparing a roast with vegetables from the kitchen garden. As they ate, they discussed strategies for the upcoming hearing. "Holloway should arrive tomorrow," Vance said. "He has copies of all your father's legal documents, including his will naming you as the sole heir to the mine." "What about your share?" Beatrice asked. "Father mentioned giving you a stake in the operation." Vance nodded. 5%, which I'm more than satisfied with. I never expected even that much when I started working for him." "Tell me how you met," Beatrice requested, genuinely curious about the man who had so quickly become her ally. Vance took a sip of wine, considering. "It was in a saloon in Piach. I'd been working odd jobs, mostly as a ranch hand, but I was looking for something more stable. I overheard your father discussing his need for someone with mining experience to help with a new tunnel he was planning. And you had that experience, some." "I'd worked silver mines in Nevada for a couple of years after the war, enough to know what I was talking about at least. Your father was skeptical at first. I wasn't exactly presenting myself in the best light in those days." "What changed his mind?" A small smile touched Vance's lips. "There was a cave-in at the Blue Eagle mine the next day. I happened to be nearby when it happened and helped with the rescue efforts. Used some techniques I'd learned from an old mining engineer in Virginia City. Your father was there, saw what I did, and offered me a job on the spot." Beatrice found herself warming to this man who spoke of her father with such obvious respect and affection. "Father always said he was a good judge of character." "He was that," Vance agreed, "and much more. He taught me everything I know about running a mining operation. Gave me responsibilities I probably didn't deserve at first." "And now you're helping his daughter protect his legacy," Beatrice said softly. "I think he would be pleased." Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of something deeper. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Chen hurried to answer it, returning moments later with a worried expression. "Mr. Jenkins is here." "Say it very urgent." Jenkins entered, hat in hand, his face grave. "Miss Fairchild, Mr. Lambert, I'm sorry to disturb your dinner, but there's been an incident at the mine." "What kind of incident?" Vance asked, rising from his chair. "Somebody set fire to the western office where we keep the recent survey maps and production records." "Was anyone hurt?" Beatrice asked, alarmed. Jenkins shook his head. "No, madam. Night watchmen spotted it early, and we managed to put it out before it spread. But most of the paperwork is destroyed." Vance and Beatrice exchanged knowing glances. "This is no coincidence," she said. "No," Vance agreed. "Harold's trying to destroy evidence, probably anything that would confirm your father's theories about the mother lode." "We need to visit the assay office in the morning," Beatrice decided. "Father always had Mr. Whitmore keep duplicate records of all assay results." "Good thinking," Vance said approvingly. "Jenkins, double the night watch at the mine. And make sure someone keeps an eye on the main shaft entrance. I wouldn't put it past Harold to try something more dangerous." After Jenkins left, Beatrice paced the study, her mind racing. "We need to find Father's journal. It would contain his most recent observations, possibly even the location where he believed the mother lode might be found." "Any idea where Harold might keep it?" Vance asked. Beatrice thought for a moment. "He has a private office in town above the Mercantile. He's been using it to conduct business since arriving for Father's funeral." "Then that's where we'll look first." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting we break in?" The corner of Vance's mouth lifted in a half-smile. "I prefer to think of it as recovering stolen property." The plan they formed was simple but risky. The following morning, Beatrice would visit her Aunt Margaret, ostensibly to mend fences. While Harold was occupied at his regular meeting with the town's business leaders, Vance would search his office for Thomas Fairchild's journal. Beatrice found herself both anxious and exhilarated by the scheme. "I've never done anything like this before," she admitted as they finalized the details. "I'd be worried if you had," Vance replied with a chuckle. "But sometimes extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures." As he prepared to leave for the night, Beatrice walked him to the door. "Thank you for everything you're doing, Vance. I'm not sure I could face all this alone." He turned to her, his expression serious. "Your father was the best man I've ever known. Helping you is the least I can do to honor his memory." He hesitated, then added, "But that's not the only reason." "Oh," she prompted when he didn't continue. "I've read every letter your father received from you over the past few years. He was so proud of each accomplishment, each insight you shared. I feel like I've known you for years, even though we've just met." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm at the thought of this man reading her letters, learning about her thoughts and dreams. Strangely, it didn't feel like an invasion of privacy, but rather a connection, a bridge between her past and present. "Father mentioned you in his letters to me as well," she admitted. "He said you reminded him of himself as a younger man, determined, principled." Vance's eyes softened. "That's high praise indeed." He placed his hat on his head. "Get some rest, Beatrice. Tomorrow will be a busy day." Morning brought clear skies and a strengthening resolve. Beatrice dressed carefully in a fashionable visiting dress of deep green, suitable for a social call on her aunt. Vance arrived promptly at 9, looking remarkably different in a clean suit and polished boots. "You clean up nicely, Mr. Lambert," she observed with a smile. "Don't get used to it," he replied with a mock grimace. "These fancy duds aren't exactly comfortable." They reviewed their plan once more, before setting out separately, Beatrice in her father's buggy toward her aunt and uncle's home on the outskirts of town, Vance on foot toward the Mercantile, where Harold kept his office. Aunt Margaret seemed genuinely pleased to see Beatrice, ushering her into the parlor with affectionate concern. "I've been so worried about you, dear. This dreadful business with the mine. Harold has been beside himself." "I imagine he has," Beatrice replied, accepting a cup of tea. "Aunt Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. Why is Uncle Harold so determined to gain control of the Silver Crescent?" Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "Harold has always lived in Thomas's shadow. Your father had the vision, the luck, the charm. Harold had none of these things. His own mining ventures failed one after another." "So this is about jealousy," Beatrice pressed. "Partly," Margaret admitted. "But it's more than that now. Harold is financially compromised. He borrowed heavily to finance his last venture, a copper mine near Flagstaff. It was a complete failure. This was revealing information. So he needs the Silver Crescent to pay his debts." Margaret nodded miserably. "That's why he was so desperate when Thomas discovered the new vein. It could be his salvation." "What about Father's journal? Do you know why he took it?" At this, Margaret looked distinctly uncomfortable. "I shouldn't say." "Please, Aunt Margaret, I need to understand." After a moment's hesitation, Margaret leaned forward. "Thomas made a discovery just before he died, something so significant he wouldn't even tell Harold what it was. He only said it would change everything. Harold is convinced the journal contains the location." Beatrice's heart raced. This confirmed what Vance had suspected. Her father had indeed found evidence of the mother lode. "Do you know where Uncle keeps the journal?" "He has a safe in his office," Margaret replied. "But Beatrice, please be careful. Harold is not himself these days. The financial pressure, the humiliation. I fear what he might do." Across town, Vance was having surprising success. Harold's office had been easy enough to access. The clerk downstairs believed Vance's story about having an appointment to discuss mining equipment. Now, alone in the cluttered office, he scanned the bookshelves and desk drawers, looking for anything that might lead him to Thomas's journal. The safe proved more challenging. It was a substantial iron box built into the wall behind a mediocre landscape, painting obvious enough that Vance found it immediately, but secure enough that he couldn't simply open it. He examined the dial carefully, considering his options. During the war, he'd learned a few tricks from a fellow soldier who'd been a locksmith in civilian life. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was worth trying. Pressing his ear to the safe, Vance slowly turned the dial, listening for the subtle clicks that might indicate the tumblers falling into place. It was painstaking work, requiring complete concentration. After nearly 30 minutes, he was rewarded with a satisfying clunk as the mechanism released. Opening the door carefully, he found several documents inside, along with a leather-bound book that could only be Thomas Fairchild's journal. Vance quickly thumbed through the journal, confirming it was what they sought. The final entries detailed Thomas's growing excitement about a discovery, a pattern in the rock formations that suggested a massive deposit directly beneath a section of land adjacent to the current mine. Tucked between the pages was a folded map, marked with Thomas's precise notations. Vance studied it briefly before securing both items inside his jacket. He was about to close the safe when he noticed another document, a deed to the adjacent property, dated just 2 days before Thomas's death. This was significant. Thomas had purchased the land where he believed the mother lode was located, but he'd done so quietly, without telling anyone, perhaps not even Vance. This could be why Harold was so desperate to gain control. The true value of the Silver Crescent wasn't just the existing mine, but the unexplored deposit on the newly acquired property. Vance had just closed the safe and replaced the painting when he heard footsteps approaching the office door. Quickly, he moved to the window, judging the distance to the awning below. It wasn't ideal, but it was his only escape route. The door handle turned just as Vance slipped through the window. He dropped onto the awning and rolled, managing to catch himself before he fell to the street below. Ducking into the alley beside the building, he made his way toward the rendezvous point. He and Beatrice had established the assay office on the edge of town. Beatrice arrived shortly after, her expression worried. "Did you find it?" Vance nodded, patting his jacket. "And more. Your father purchased the adjacent property just before he died. Property he believed contains a massive silver deposit." Beatrice's eyes widened. "That explains everything. Uncle Harold must have learned about the purchase and realized what it meant." Inside the assay office, Mr. Whitmore greeted Beatrice warmly. "Miss Fairchild, what a pleasure to see you. Your father is sorely missed around here." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. We actually need your help. Do you maintain copies of all the assays done for the Silver Crescent?" "Certainly do." "Your father insisted on it, said records were as valuable as the silver itself." Vance produced the journal and map. "We're particularly interested in assays from this area," he said, pointing to the marked section. Whitmore adjusted his spectacles, examining the map carefully. "Interesting." "Yes, we did several samples from that region at your father's request. Unusual formations, nothing like we'd seen before in the area." He rummaged through a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. "Here we are. The results were, well, see for yourself." The assay reports confirmed Thomas's theory. The samples contained traces of minerals typically found only in the richest silver deposits, clear indicators of what miners called the mother lode. "This is it," Beatrice breathed. "Father found it, the deposit that could make the Silver Crescent the richest mine in the territory." And now we know why your uncle has been so desperate, Vance added grimly. This isn't just about the existing mine, it's about what lies beneath that adjacent property. They thanked Whitmore and left quickly, aware that time was running short. Harold would soon discover the safe had been opened and the journal taken. We need to get this information to Judge Harmon before the hearing tomorrow, Beatrice said as they hurried toward the courthouse. And we need to secure that adjacent property, Vance added. If Harold realizes what your father discovered, he might try to claim it separately from the mine. At the courthouse, they found Judge Harmon preparing to leave for the day. He agreed to see them briefly in his chambers. Your Honor, Beatrice began, we've discovered evidence that my uncle's attempts to gain control of the Silver Crescent are motivated by more than familial concern. My father discovered a massive silver deposit on adjacent land he purchased shortly before his death information. My uncle tried to conceal by stealing his journal. Judge Harmon's bushy eyebrows rose as he examined the journal and assay reports. This is certainly compelling, Miss Fairchild, but it doesn't change the legal matter at hand determining the rightful owner of your father's estate. But it does establish motive for Harold Fairchild's actions, Vance pointed out. He's not acting in Miss Fairchild's best interests, as he claims, but rather attempting to defraud her of an extremely valuable discovery. The judge stroked his beard thoughtfully. I see your point, Mr. Lambert. Rest assured, I'll take this information into consideration at tomorrow's hearing. He carefully returned the documents. Keep these safe, they may prove crucial. As they left the courthouse, a sense of cautious optimism filled Beatrice. I think he believed us. He did, Vance agreed. But Harold won't give up easily, especially now that we have the journal. His prediction proved accurate sooner than expected. As they approached Beatrice's house, they noticed a buggy parked outside Harold's. Let me handle this, Beatrice said firmly. Inside, they found Harold pacing the parlor, his face mottled with rage. Where is it? He demanded as soon as he saw them. Where is my brother's journal? Beatrice removed her gloves calmly. You mean the journal you stole from my father's study? The one detailing his discovery of the silver deposit on the adjacent property. Harold's face went pale. You have no idea what you're talking about. I think we do, Vance said, stepping forward. Thomas discovered the mother lode, didn't he? And he purchased the land where it's located just days before he died. A convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Harold shot back, his voice laced with insinuation. Beatrice stiffened. What exactly are you suggesting, Uncle? Harold's eyes narrowed. Only that your father's sudden death benefited certain parties more than others. His gaze shifted meaningfully to Vance. That's outrageous, Beatrice gasped. Father died of a heart condition. Did he? Or was he helped along by someone who stood to gain from his discovery? Harold's voice dripped with malice. Someone who mysteriously disappeared right after Thomas's death, only to reappear just in time to prevent you from signing over your inheritance. Vance took a step toward Harold, his expression dangerous. Be very careful what you're implying, Fairchild. Harold stood his ground. I'm implying nothing, merely pointing out curious circumstances. Thomas was in perfect health until the day he died, the day after he argued with you about the new discovery. Beatrice looked between the two men, doubt flickering briefly across her face. Is that true? Did you argue with Father the day before he died? Vance's jaw tightened. We had a disagreement, yes, about the best way to develop the new vein. But to suggest I had anything to do with his death is not just false, it's despicable. Harold pressed his advantage. Ask yourself, Beatrice, why did Lambert leave town immediately after Thomas's death? Why did he return only when he learned you were about to sign over control of the mine? And most importantly, Why did Thomas never mention giving him a stake in the operation in any of his letters to you? Seeds of doubt took root in Beatrice's mind. Her father had indeed mentioned Vance often, but never as a partner, only as a trusted employee. And the timing of his absence and return did seem convenient. "Vance?" she questioned, hating the uncertainty in her voice. "Your father asked me to deliver documents to Carson City the day before he died," Vance explained, his eyes never leaving Harold. "I left the following morning, not knowing he'd passed until I arrived there. When I learned what happened, I stayed to meet with Holloway and gather all the legal documentation your father had filed, including his will naming me executor." "A convenient story," Harold sneered. "The truth," Vance countered, "as Holloway will confirm when he arrives tonight." Harold's confidence wavered slightly at the mention of the lawyer. "Whatever documents you produce won't change the facts. Thomas was my brother. Blood should count for something in this territory." "It does," Beatrice said, finding her resolve again, "but so does the truth. Father trusted me with his legacy, and he trusted Vance to help protect it. Nothing you say will change that." Harold's expression hardened. "We'll see what Judge Harmon has to say tomorrow. In the meantime, I suggest you consider my offer carefully, Beatrice, a young woman alone in this territory. Accidents happen all too easily in mining towns." The threat, thinly veiled as it was, hung in the air as Harold stormed out. When he was gone, Beatrice turned to Vance, her expression troubled. "I want to believe you." "But you're not sure you can," he finished for her, his voice quiet with understanding. "I don't blame you for having doubts, Beatrice. Your uncle is clever. He knows exactly which seeds to plant." "Did you and Father argue that day?" she asked directly. Vance nodded. "Yes, but not about what Harold implied. Your father wanted to announce the discovery immediately. I urged caution, suggested we secure the adjacent properties first to prevent claim jumpers. He agreed, reluctantly. And you left the next morning, at dawn." "He was fine when I left, tired from staying up late working on his journal, but otherwise well." Vance's eyes held hers steadily. "I respected your father more than any man I've ever known, Beatrice. I would never have harmed him." Something in his unwavering gaze convinced her. "I believe you," she said softly, "and I'm sorry for doubting, even for a moment." Relief washed over his features. "No apology necessary. Harold is manipulating a difficult situation. He nearly succeeded." The evening stage brought Mr. Holloway, Thomas Fairchild's lawyer from Carson City. A thin, precise man with spectacles and a neatly trimmed beard, he greeted Beatrice with genuine warmth. "Miss Fairchild, your father spoke of you constantly. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, though I wish the circumstances were different." Over dinner, Holloway confirmed everything Vance had told her. "Your father amended his will last year, naming you his sole heir and Mr. Lambert as executor. He also left Mr. Lambert a 5% share in the mine as compensation for his contributions." "And the adjacent property?" Beatrice asked. "The one Father purchased just before his death," Holloway nodded. "Included in the estate, of course. Thomas was quite excited about it, though he wouldn't tell me exactly why. Said it would be his legacy to you, something that would secure your future for generations." "It will," Vance said, explaining their discovery of Thomas's journal and the assay reports confirming the potential mother lode. Holloway's eyes widened. "Extraordinary. No wonder Harold has been so persistent. A deposit of that magnitude could be worth millions." "Which makes tomorrow's hearing all the more important," Beatrice noted. "Uncle Harold won't give up easily." "No, he won't," Holloway agreed. "But with the documentation I've brought, plus your father's journal and the assay reports, I believe Judge Harmon will have no choice but to recognize your rightful claim to the entire estate." That night, after Holloway retired to the guest room, Beatrice found herself unable to sleep. She wandered onto the veranda, where she found Vance sitting in one of the wicker chairs, staring out at the star-filled desert sky. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, joining him. He shook his head. "Too much on my mind." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of Silver Reef distant piano music from the saloon, the occasional shout or laugh, the constant hum of the stamp mill that operated day and night. "I've been thinking about what happens after tomorrow," Beatrice said finally. "Assuming all goes well," Vance asked. "Yes. The Silver Crescent will be mine along with Father's discovery. It's an enormous responsibility." Vance turned to her. "Are you having second thoughts about staying?" She considered the question carefully. "No. These past few days have shown me that this is where I belong. Father built something remarkable here, and I want to continue his work. He would be proud to hear you say that. But I can't do it alone," she continued. "I'll need help, someone who understands the operation, who shared Father's vision." Vance's expression softened in the moonlight. "Are you offering me a job, Miss Fairchild?" "A partnership," she clarified. "Beyond the 5% Father already gave you." "I think we could work well together, don't you?" Something shifted in his gaze, a warmth that had nothing to do with business arrangements. "I think we already do." The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. Beatrice found herself acutely aware of his proximity, of the quiet strength he radiated. "It's getting late," she said finally, rising from her chair. "We should both try to get some rest before tomorrow." Vance stood as well, towering over her in the darkness. "Beatrice," he said softly, "whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know I would have helped you even if your father hadn't named me executor. Not for any stake in the mine, but because—" He hesitated, searching for words. "Because," she prompted, her heart quickening. "Because in the past few days, I've come to care about you not as Thomas's daughter, but as the remarkable woman you are." The confession, simple as it was, sent warmth spreading through her. "I've come to care about you too, Vance. More than I expected to." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand in his. The touch was gentle, respectful, yet it sent a current of awareness through her. "When this is all settled," he said, "I'd like to court you properly if you're amenable." A smile touched her lips. "I think I would be very amenable to that." The hearing the next morning drew a crowd. News of the dispute over the Silver Crescent had spread throughout Silver Reef, and many were curious about the outcome. Judge Harmon called the proceedings to order precisely at 10 o'clock. Harold arrived with 2 lawyers from Salt Lake City, looking confident despite the setbacks of the previous day. Mr. Holloway presented Thomas Fairchild's will first, establishing Beatrice as the sole heir and Vance as the executor. The documents were in order, properly witnessed and notarized. Harold's lawyers countered with arguments about Beatrice's inexperience and the tradition of male inheritance in the territory. When that approach gained little traction with the judge, they shifted strategies. "Your Honor," the elder lawyer said, "we have reason to believe that Thomas Fairchild's death may not have been from natural causes. We request a postponement of these proceedings pending an investigation." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Beatrice felt Vance stiffen beside her. Judge Harmon frowned. "That's a serious allegation, Counselor. Do you have evidence to support it?" "We have testimonies from several witnesses who observed an argument between Thomas Fairchild and Vance Lambert the day before Mr. Fairchild's death. Additionally, Mr. Lambert left town immediately afterward, only to return when he learned Miss Fairchild was about to sign over her inheritance." The judge turned to Holloway. "Your response?" Holloway rose calmly. "Your Honor, these are baseless insinuations designed to delay the proceedings." Mr. Lambert left town at Thomas Fairchild's request to deliver documents to my office in Carson City. I can confirm this, as can the stage company that transported him. Furthermore, Dr. Wells, who attended Mr. Fairchild in his final hours, has provided a written statement confirming death by natural causes specifically, a chronic heart condition that Mr. Fairchild had been managing for several years. He produced the doctor's statement and handed it to the judge. As for the alleged argument, Mr. Lambert has never denied that he and Mr. Fairchild had a professional disagreement about mine operations, a common occurrence in any business relationship. To suggest this led to foul play is not only speculative but defamatory. Judge Harmon reviewed the doctor's statement carefully. This appears to be in order, unless you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, counselor, not mere speculation. I'm inclined to dismiss this line of argument. Harold leaned forward, whispering urgently to his lawyer, who then addressed the court again. Your Honor, if I may present one more piece of evidence, a letter from Thomas Fairchild to my client, dated the day before his death, expressing concerns about Mr. Lambert's trustworthiness. He produced a folded paper and handed it to the judge. Beatrice felt a chill run through her. Could her father really have doubted Vance? Judge Harmon read the letter silently, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up. This letter does express some concerns, but it appears to be referring to a business disagreement, not any personal mistrust. Additionally, the signature doesn't quite match other examples of Mr. Fairchild's handwriting that I've seen in these proceedings. He passed the letter to Holloway. Your thoughts, counselor? Holloway examined the letter carefully, then handed it to Beatrice. Miss Fairchild, is this your father's handwriting? Beatrice studied the letter, relief washing over her. No, Your Honor, it is not. My father's penmanship was much more precise. This is a crude imitation. That's absurd, Harold sputtered. She's lying to protect her partner. Judge Harmon's expression hardened. Watch your accusations, Mr. Fairchild. I have Thomas Fairchild's will and several business documents here for comparison. The signature on this letter is indeed questionable. He set the letter aside. I've heard enough. Based on the documentation presented, it is clear that Thomas Fairchild intended his daughter, Beatrice Fairchild, to inherit his entire estate, including the Silver Crescent mine and all associated properties. Mr. Lambert's role as executor is likewise confirmed. The attempt to present fabricated evidence casts serious doubt on Mr. Harold Fairchild's claims and motives. He struck his gavel decisively. The petition to override Thomas Fairchild's will is denied. Miss Fairchild is hereby recognized as the legal owner of her father's estate. Mr. Lambert will continue in his capacity as executor until the estate is fully settled. A cheer went up from the miners who had gathered at the back of the courtroom, men who had respected Thomas and who had come to appreciate Vance's fair treatment over the years. Harold stood, his face contorted with rage. This isn't over, he hissed. No woman can run a mining operation in this territory. You'll fail, and when you do, my offer will stand at half its current value. With that, he stormed out, his lawyers hurrying behind him. Beatrice barely registered his departure. She was too overwhelmed with relief and gratitude, accepting congratulations from well-wishers and the warm handshake of Judge Harmon. Your father would be proud, the judge told her quietly. He always said you had more sense than most men he knew. I'm beginning to see he was right. Outside the courthouse, in the bright Utah sunshine, Beatrice turned to Vance, her heart full. We did it. You did it, he corrected with a smile. I just helped a little along the way. She shook her head. No, Vance. We did it together, just as we'll run the Silver Crescent together. The weeks that followed were busy ones for Beatrice and Vance. With her ownership of the Silver Crescent firmly established, they turned their attention to exploring the adjacent property, where Thomas had believed the mother lode lay hidden. Following his journal notes and maps, they sank a new shaft at the precise location he had marked. The work was challenging. The rock formations were unlike anything they had encountered in the main mine, but Thomas's predictions proved accurate. After 3 weeks of digging, they struck the richest silver vein anyone in Silver Reef had ever seen. News of the discovery spread quickly, bringing a new wave of prosperity to the town. The Silver Crescent expanded its operations, hiring more miners and investing in new equipment. Beatrice insisted on implementing the safety measures her father had always prioritized, earning the loyalty and respect of the workforce. Harold and Margaret Fairchild left Silver Reef shortly after the hearing, returning to Salt Lake City. Beatrice later heard that Harold's financial troubles had forced him to sell most of his assets to satisfy his creditors. As for Vance, he proved to be everything Beatrice could have hoped for in a business partner: knowledgeable, ethical, and supportive of her ideas for the mine's future. But more importantly, he was becoming something far more significant in her personal life. True to his word, he courted her properly with chaperone dinners, rides through the spectacular red rock country surrounding Silver Reef, and quiet evenings on the veranda discussing books, ideas, and dreams for the future. On a perfect autumn evening, 6 months after they had first met, Vance took Beatrice to a special spot overlooking the valley where the Silver Crescent's operations sprawled below. The setting sun painted the red rocks in fiery hues, creating a breathtaking backdrop for the question he had been waiting to ask. "I came to Utah looking for silver," he said, taking her hands in his. "Instead, I found something infinitely more precious." He dropped to one knee, producing a simple but elegant ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Beatrice Fairchild, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The answer required no thought at all. "Yes," she said, joy bubbling through her. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding, held in the spring of 1883, was the social event of the season in Silver Reef. The entire town turned out to celebrate, from the miners and their families to the merchants and bankers who had come to respect Beatrice as a fair and capable businesswoman. Over the years that followed, the Silver Crescent flourished under their joint leadership. The mother lode proved even more extensive than Thomas had predicted, providing wealth that allowed Beatrice and Vance to invest in other ventures throughout the territory. They had 3 children, 2 sons, and a daughter, all of whom grew up understanding the value of hard work, integrity, and the importance of treating others with respect, regardless of their station in life. Silver Reef, like many mining towns, eventually faced challenges as the easily accessible ore began to dwindle. But unlike many such communities, it didn't become a ghost town. Thanks to the diverse investments and industries Beatrice and Vance had encouraged, it evolved into a thriving small city. On warm summer evenings, long after the excitement of their early days had settled into comfortable routine, Beatrice and Vance would often sit on the veranda of the home they had shared for decades, watching the sunset paint the red rocks with the same fiery hues they had admired on the day of their engagement. "Do you ever think about how close we came to missing all this?" Beatrice asked one such evening, her hand nestled comfortably in his. Vance squeezed her fingers gently. "Sometimes, if I had been delayed on my return from Carson City, if you had signed those papers. If you hadn't burst through that door at exactly the right moment," she added with a smile. He chuckled, the sound deepened by age but still vibrant with life. I think we were meant to find each other one way or another. Your father knew it before either of us did." Beatrice leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "He would have loved seeing what the Silver Crescent became what we built together." "Not just the mine," Vance said softly, watching their grandchildren playing in the garden below. "Everything." As the last rays of sunlight faded and the first stars appeared in the desert sky, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a desperate situation and a dramatic rescue, but it had grown into something far more profound, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that had only deepened with each passing year. The silver that had drawn fortune seekers to this remote corner of Utah had long since been extracted from the earth, but the true treasure Beatrice and Vance had found was worth far more than any precious metal. It was a life built together, day by day, through challenges and triumphs, sorrows and joys, a legacy more enduring than any mine, no matter how rich its veins. And it had all begun with a single moment of courage, a door flung open, a command shouted, and two lives forever changed by the power of being in exactly the right place at precisely the right time.